Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel. This is the disembodied voice of Leeor Alexandra because I forgot to record an intro to this incredible conversation with Dr. Taylor Burrowes. This is just a segment from the entire conversation, which can be found on my podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's Inner Worlds with Leeor Alexandra. It will be linked in the description below. I hope you enjoy the conversation. If you do, please give it a thumbs up. Please comment something sweet to the beautiful and intelligent Dr. Taylor Burrowes. Thank you. Love you. What stood out to me most in your book, Taylor, it's something that I'm in full agreement with too, and something that I think could be misunderstood with self-love and kind of like the self-development community. But it seems that you do advise people who are searching for relationships and people who are in relationships already to bring the focus onto themselves more so than trying to change how other people are. And I may have misunderstood that, but kind of like how they show up in the world and how to develop themselves in order to see themselves in happier relationships. Is that kind of an accurate representation?
To me, the way that I would describe it is like it's sort of that ego that we have that we're not always conscious of. And I mean, obviously, we all have an ego, but when it is not serving our best interests, it has a way of projecting our desires onto the world. And so then we seek something out there that we think is going to fulfill us. So we make it into a fantasy, some kind of fantasy version of that object, right? That's going to bring us happiness. And we do that with people when we're dating. And so my process allows you to really unlearn a lot of that socialization or just those influences that really cause us to like pressure us to do this selfishly. It's like a gratification system that we're acting in, right? So instead of first unlearning that, instead of projecting that ego out onto, I want a tall, dark, and handsome guy with like a thick bank account and da 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 da, you're actually looking at yourself first, and you're determining what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what are the qualities that make you authentically you and bring the best out in you, and projecting. It's like you have to think about who the complement would be for that person. And so that's the person that you're going to be best matched with, but you don't look for them. You just live your life the best that you can as that person, that ideal self.
And I love this concept of the ideal self in your book. I loved it so much, Taylor, and I want to talk more about that. Um, but first, a little bit more about vetting. I wanted to ask. So the process was called the ideal relationship system, right? I think it's being rebranded into the vetting system.
Yes. Someone
Yeah.
pointed out that it was the IRS, and then I was like, okay, yeah, that's not going to work.
I didn't even realize that. I love that. So, but it's such the book is so good, and I got so much value out of it, and was able to really take those things, even being in a relationship right now, and apply them to my relationship to better it. But I want to talk a little bit about that process. What is vetting, and why should people be doing this while they're dating or even in a relationship?
Basically, vetting is the process of getting to know someone or people in general instead of focusing on jumping into dating, because that word is so diluted. Like it just doesn't really have like one singular meaning anymore. And vetting gets us back to more of a classic outlook where things were maybe in the olden days, but we don't want to like typecast ourselves as like out of date. It's just taking what worked way back then and modernizing it. So, I mean, I'm a modern woman. I'm not a trad what do they call them? Like traditional conservative woman, like in the 1950s. That is not me at all. But people are so scared to look backwards and learn from the past and history. I mean, they love looking at the past and like repeating old wounds and bad things, but they don't like to take the good things from the past, which is ironic. Anyway, I find that it's a little bit of a renaissance, right? The vetting system is a renaissance to courting. But in modernizing it, it's really just about getting off dating apps, stop jumping ahead into bed or just into like a superficial relationship, and just focus on getting to know someone and pace that process with time so that you don't get too far ahead of yourself before you've organically connected to someone.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I can see that it's kind of like a renaissance of those core values, right? So what do you think did work back then that the vetting system kind of takes people through and modernizes?
Well, the one thing was that it was nearby, right? Like there was a proximity to getting to know people. So you were introduced to people who were familiar to your family, and there wasn't this sort of detachment that happened, this anonymity as much, right? So there was a level of just awareness of what a person's character was, what kind of like family they came from, what were their values, and then knowing more about the person, people would tend to connect on things that were shared values. And so instead of it being based on looks or money or lifestyle, just from like more of a self-interested way, it was more about the depth of a person. That's why it tended to work better and had a longevity to the relationship, because people were connecting. Well, one, their level of commitment was probably more founded on investing in a lifelong relationship. Now it seems like people are just ready to cut and run so fast, right? So I think it's a mixture of things.
I really agree with that, Taylor. I feel like one of the things that's really missing in modern dating is that focus on shared value and that kind of like, why are you dating? You know, we kind of, and it's not to cast judgment on the way that anybody lives their lives. It's just more like I work also and talk to thousands of people every day. I see comments about people searching for their ideal relationship or their specific person, their partner. And I think that in that process, the understanding of shared values has completely been forgotten. And I think that it's very for even for women who are just start or women and men, right? How are we supposed to understand or kind of evaluate what our values are?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know. So that's, I think, a good point to start at, is really evaluating what is important to you, what matters. Because a lot of times we're just repeating what's been told to us, or what society says is important, kind of like the virtue signaling that's happening a lot. Like people are just sort of dictated to of what causes matter, and if you don't fall in line with those causes, then you're a bad person, right? So I have a lot of clients who are actually examining themselves for the first time and really looking at, is this something that I agree with? Is this something that I really believe? Or is it something that I'm just, sort of pressured to stand up and be angry about or fight for because that's what the news is telling me I should be doing, right? Or I'm scared to be outcast, right? A lot of people feel that way. So they're starting to examine their views about gender roles, about a lot of these social issues that are, I mean, trust me, I'm an ex official like professional advocate of social justice, so I get it. Like it's important to care and have compassion about marginalized groups, but some of the rhetoric that we're fed is quite just, it's like inflated, it's inflammatory. So I think a lot of it has other motives attached to it when people don't really necessarily know why they believe something that they do.
So it's kind of like getting around all that subversion and all the things that we're being fed and starting to understand what do I feel compassionate about or towards, and what do I care about?